Do you remember what you were doing in 1987? Well, for Daytonians, it was the year of a giant fire that changed safety forever.
Flames destroyed the Sherwin Williams paint warehouse. They also threatened the city's water supply. Jordan Burgess spoke with the men at the center of the inferno, whose leadership kept our water safe and clean.
The fire is still out of control, and we have a number of news crews on the scene. One of them happens to be Dave Calabro and his photographer, and these are the pictures right now of the site.
All these years later, the flames are still seared into their memories.
Biggest fire I ever see in my 33 years in this business.
But the raging inferno at the Dayton Sherwin Williams warehouse 25 years ago isn't remembered just for what happened, but what didn't happen, and how it may have rescued the city from an even bigger disaster.
And he may be the only fire chief on the planet that became famous for not fighting a fire.
The warehouse is now a field, the only machine here a mower. But in 1987, it was like a paint-filled time bomb waiting to splatter. You see, because of decisions made decades earlier, the Sherwin Williams warehouse was sitting on Dayton's wellfield.
In retrospect, probably wasn't the best thing.
People had warned about the danger for years, and all it took to set the city's worst nightmare in motion was a small spill by a worker on a lift truck.
And when he backed that piece of equipment out to get out of the way, that ignited the spilled product, and that was the start of the fire.
The plant had prepared for just such a situation. It had state-of-the-art sprinkler systems, but even they weren't enough.
That particular night and the way events turned out, I think those suppression systems didn't last probably a few seconds, and they were null and void.
The worker on the truck suffered burns to his legs, but thanks to a practice evacuation plan, everyone made it out safely.
You know, they had told us how fast it could go, and I just ran. When I seen it, I headed for the door.
Believe it or not, Dayton Fire Chief Glenn Alexander was actually painting at the time he got the call.
A neighbor had made a toy box for my daughter, and I was painting the thing.
When firefighters arrived on scene, they had hundreds of aerosol cans raining down on them. In the years afterward, they would be found on the nearby Kitty Hawk golf course and the roofs of buildings.
They were just rocketing. You can see the bottoms blown out.
In this old video, you can hear them exploding.
It was like they were under artillery fire.
Aside from the paint can rockets, the fire was inching closer to other buildings. But Alexander knew he had a bigger issue at hand.
Let me tell you what our real problem is. You're standing on our biggest exposure.
Having been part of a wellfield protection task force and having talked with Water Department Director Bill Zilli and Environmental Manager Dusty Hall, Alexander knew the runoff from fighting a fire could pollute the drinking water.
Immediately in my mind, my whole thought process went for the wellfield.
So he made the toughest decision of his career and told crews to stop fighting the fire.
And I was bombarded with questions about, you're letting this thing burn down. And I said, yes, I am.
They're going to let this fire burn out. That's the whole idea, is let this fire burn out.
Unfortunately, firefighters weren't the only ones dumping water on the fire. The sprinkler system was still going. So the task fell to Bill Ford and another firefighter to go near the building and shut it down.
These aerosol cans are zinging by our heads, and he's saying, this is neat, you know. Let's just worry about getting in here and get this job done and get out, you know.
With the sprinklers off and no water being poured on the flames, the fire continued to burn for 6 days. The loss was in the range of $64 million. The 120 jobs there also up in smoke. But the wellfield was saved.
In this incident, as catastrophic as it could have been, there was never an operating public water supply well that became contaminated, ever. And no one would have ever imagined that that was possible.
25 years later, we went back to the site of the fire with those whose actions helped keep it from becoming even worse.
A lot of courageous decisions were made that night.
The impact of the blaze is still being felt today. It changed fire codes, making buildings safer. It also made people realize the importance of protecting well fields.
So what we learned from this was you can't engineer a facility with that kind of material to be safe in a place like this.
In the years following the fire, Dayton ramped up its well field protection practices and is now one of the nation's leaders in keeping drinking water safe.
People come here from all around the world to see how this drinking water has been protected. So it's a very positive story in the end.
But the men who made the difference that fateful night say those lessons of the past are only useful if, like the fire, they're seared into our minds.
Now, that fire led to reports by the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard and the U.S. Fire Administration, which compared the actions at the Sherwin Williams fire to a similar one at a Swiss chemical warehouse. In that case, Swiss firefighters used water to put out the flames and contaminated the Rhine River. So you can understand the importance of the decisions made that night at the Sherwin Williams fire. Reporting live, Jordan Burgess, 2 News.